The Witch Panic in Salem is from the Mentor magazine and was written by Hildegard Hawthorne. Fear has probably been responsible for as many crimes as deliberate evil has. A frightened man or woman is something to be afraid of, and a frightened community may give way to acts that will horrify the whole world. Salem, Massachusetts, in the dreadful months of 1692 to 93, gave proof of this fact and murdered 20 innocent persons before its panic was cured. It is difficult for us today to realize the actuality of the belief in the devil and his presence in this world that inspired almost everybody in the 17th century. The wisest men of that time believed absolutely in the personal activity of Satan. Blackstone, oracle of British law, and on whom not only England's laws were formed, but also our own, declared in positive terms that witches existed, and many lawyers and ministers agreed with him. In 1690, Cotton Mather, who was one of the most prominent and important ministers of the Puritan Church in America, published a book in which he attempted to prove the existence of witches and cited many cases of their power and of their methods. A prodigious amount of discussion followed till the minds of the people were filled with morbid fears and suspicions. In Boston, in 1688, an old Irish crone had been hanged for witchcraft on the testimony of the four children of John Goodman, a most respected citizen, and there had been executions in Charleston, Dorchester, and Cambridge, while a certain Mary Oliver in 1650 had actually confessed to being a witch. In the winter of 1691, several young girls of Salem met in the home of one Samuel Parris, a minister of the gospel, to practice palm reading and other magic tricks under the tuition of a West Indian slave woman, Tituba by name. Presently, two of the group, the youngest about 10 and 11 years of age, were noticed acting queerly, and very soon two more joined them in what were described as curious antics. They would creep into the holes under the tables and the chairs, and they made rambling, ridiculous speeches, odd gestures, and even fell down in fits. A whisper ran through the town. These children must be bewitched. Doctors could do nothing for them. Presently, the girls spoke of being obsessed by the old slave woman to whom they had been going for magic instruction. Poor Tituba, she was forthwith seized, beaten, and threatened with worse unless she confessed. She admitted that she was a witch, and stated that she had signed a big red book, being urged thereto by the devil in person. In a short time, all of the 10 girls that had met at Mr. Parris's were affected, and they began to accuse others, among them Goodwife Corey, saying that she bit, scratched, and strangled them. The whole village was in a turmoil by this time, and the 10 afflicted persons became the center of everyone's interest. Mr. Parris got testimony from the bewitched and was eager for the punishment of the accused. A public hearing was held in April, presided over by 6 magistrates and several ministers of the gospel. During the hearing, a Mrs. Proctor was cried out, as they put it, meaning that she was accused of being a witch. As she sank down in terror at the cries, her husband endeavored to comfort her, upon which he too was cried out. So these went to prison with the slave woman and Goodwife Corey and 2 others. Fear was invading the hearts of the entire community. Fear not alone of the witches and their evil spells, but fear of accusation, of being cried out. Cotton Mather got very much excited and put all of his eloquence and effort into the fight with the devil. Those who were accused were hustled quickly into prison, and on June 10th, one Bridget Bishop, who had been accused 20 years before being a witch but had escaped conviction, was hanged on the testimony of a sick man. Later dying, this man confessed that he had lied about the old lady. Sir William Phips now became governor of the colony. He threw the accused into chains, and for a while the torments of the afflicted ceased. This seemed to be pretty much fair proof against the witches, so later in the same month, 5 more were hanged. Each and all protested innocence to the last. New batches were sent to prison, and the number of the afflicted people increased. On August 19th, 5 more were brought to be hanged on Gallows Hill. One of these was a minister, a Mr. Burroughs. On the ladder, with the noose about his neck, he gave a serious speech protesting his own innocence, that tears filled the eyes of many of the spectators, and there were murmurs that things were going too far. His accusers thereupon shrieked out that they could see a squat black man standing at his elbow and dictating to him, and so fear held all the sympathizers silent. Another of this batch, John Willard, had been active in running down suspected witches when suddenly he was himself cried out of. Giles Corey, seeing how the juries feared to give any acquittal, refused to be tried, being a bold, stout man, but the courage helped him not. He was squeezed to death in a press, a ghastly execution to be sure. And less than a week later, 8 more went to their death. Accusations still poured in. Among those accused was Mrs. Hale, wife of a minister. And Minister Hale had been most eager in persecuting witches, but now that it was his wife who had fell under the ban, he began to see things in a new light. Other very sober people were also accused, and now some began to think and even to say that perhaps the devil could take on a good man's shape merely to deceive people and to bring about the destruction of those he hated for their very goodness. This idea began to prevail with many, and gradually to gain influence enough to prevent further executions. In fact, the storm was over. The madness disappeared almost as swiftly as it had come. In the early part of 1693, many were set free, and even those that had confessed to witchcraft were released. As soon as the panic died, the afflicted ceased to be harmed. Those that had served on the juries admitted that they had acted under delusion and begged forgiveness of their fellow men and of God. Those that had confessed declared the confessions had been forced from them in fear of torture and death. The bloody hands were washed, the bones of the dead were given decent burial, and Salem turned to other matters. In order to appreciate just what this horrid chapter in human history meant, let us stop to consider that these ideas were held with just as an entire conviction as you give to the wonders of radio, for example. The old serpent was considered to be everywhere about, driving the briskest business imaginable, bargaining for souls in every likely or unlikely spot, using strange and fearful spells to win his victims, having it in his power to offer all manner of worldly blessings in return for the article he needed to keep hell full. It is against this background of conviction and fear that the Salem delusion must be placed in order to be fairly seen.